They say every stitch tells a story. But what if some stories are never meant to be told? Imagine this. A seemingly ordinary tailor shop nestled in your town, inconspicuous, even welcoming. Its wooden sign simply reads, "Fine fabrics and threads." Its owner, a quiet man named Elias, harbored a secret darker than a moonless night. When Elias first opened shop years ago, his customer service was unrivaled. People adored his craftsmanship. Each article of clothing seemed to fit perfectly, almost as if it were custom-made to reflect the soul of its wearer. His little shop became a destination. But here's the thing, not many new customers returned. They disappeared, just vanished, without a word. No one thought to put the pieces together. After all, people move on, right? I'm telling you this story because what happened to a girl named Clara still gives me chills. Clara was a young artist who had recently moved into town. Eccentric, curious, she adored antiques and vintage threads. So naturally, an old tailor shop caught her eye. "This is my kind of place," she thought to herself. The shop was dimly lit, but smelled faintly of lavender and aged pine. It had a vintage charm, almost like stepping into another century. Elias, with his slicked gray hair and piercing blue eyes, greeted her with a nod. He wasn't overly friendly, but far from unpleasant. His aura was neutral. "What can I help you with today?" he asked, softly brushing stray bits of lint from an immaculately stitched coat. Clara explained her fascination with retro fashion. She wanted a custom dress, a full skirt made from velvet, something unique for a gallery opening she was planning. Without a word, Elias nodded and then, cryptically, said, "Your fabric chooses the pattern." Clara found his comment oddly poetic, though a little strange. Elias extended his hands and displayed rolls of fabric with enchanting patterns and textures. Despite all the options, a dark navy velvet with faint golden flecks called to her. She swore she could see the faintest ripples shimmering across its surface, as if it were alive. Over the next week, Elias worked tirelessly on her gown. Clara occasionally dropped by to see his progress. Each time she noticed something peculiar. Elias never measured her, never sought additional direction, and yet the dress began to take shape with eerie perfection, as if it somehow understood her desires better than she did herself. Each stitch appeared seamless, like it was not touched by human hands. The day before the gallery, Clara eagerly arrived to retrieve her dress. The final product was more exquisite than she'd imagined, deep navy velvet woven with thin, glimmering gold. She was in awe, but as she thanked Elias profusely, he just observed her, saying, "Wear it wisely. Pay attention to the shadows, always the shadows." What did that even mean? The next night at the gallery, Clara became the centerpiece of admiration. People gasped at the elegance of her gown, how it hugged her frame perfectly, shimmering under the soft amber lighting of the space. But as the evening progressed, she couldn't shake a bizarre sensation that something was watching her. Not someone, but something. You know those goosebumps that ripple across your skin when you feel eyes on you? Clara could swear shadows on the walls shifted unnaturally. It wasn't just the way they stretched and bent around the corners. It was as if they moved in a rhythm to the faint rustling sound only she could hear. At first, she dismissed the feeling as pre-show jitters, or maybe the wine. But then things became undeniable. As she walked through different rooms, every shadow seemed darker, longer. They leaned toward her, merged together like liquid spilling over the edges of her surroundings. She caught brief glimpses of flickers, silhouettes writhing in her peripheral vision, gone when she spun around. "I'm definitely just tired," she told herself. But Clara wasn't the only one to notice something odd. A fellow artist named Mark approached her, his tone wary. "Clara, are you feeling okay? The shadows around you, they keep moving, following you," he muttered. Her stomach sank. "I thought it was my imagination," she responded, voice trembling. Mark shook his head, stepping closer. "No, I saw it too, around you. It's like they're alive, reacting to you." Fear gripping her chest, Clara tried dismissing the remark as a cruel prank, but the fear planted its seed, growing uncontrollably in her mind. She became hyper-aware, and the faint rustling she'd attributed to her dress suddenly sounded like whispers. She couldn't make out distinct words, but it was as though many voices whispered secrets in some lost language. She decided she couldn't stay any longer. Excusing herself, Clara made her way toward the exit, walking briskly past glowing exhibits. But as she stepped away from the lights and toward the quiet parking lot, something terrified her. The shadows weren't just following her on the walls anymore. They bled into the ground and slithered up like remote tendrils. Each step she took sent her heart racing faster. It was as if invisible eyes were glaring at her, countless probing stares that weighed her spirit heavy. She broke into a run, kicking off her heels and clutching her purse tightly until she finally reached her tiny apartment. Slamming the door shut, she turned every light on, refusing to touch the shadows lurking at the edges of the walls. She tore off the dress in a wave of frantic panic and threw it across the room. And that's when she noticed. The dress wasn't empty anymore. Silhouettes of distorted faces writhed through the folds of the fabric. Their mouths moved soundlessly, pressed against the velvet, like prisoners clawing at thin glass. Among those faces, she recognized some of her lost acquaintances from the town. People she remembered mentioning Elias's shop before their inexplicable disappearances. And then Clara's sparking revelation hit her. Elias wasn't a tailor, not a regular one. He was a collector. Every customer who vanished hadn't simply left. They'd been stitched into his creations, their souls trapped forever in the threads, tethered to his masterpieces like twisted trophies. The faces staring back from Clara's dress grew closer, bulging at the seams. She screamed, backing into the corner of her apartment. The shadows, now unbridled without the dress restraining them, seemed to swell into monstrous forms, spilling onto her walls. They whispered her name, distorted and drawn out, consuming the room in sound. Then she blacked out. Clara wasn't found for days. When someone finally broke into her apartment, they discovered nothing but her velvet dress hanging on the wall, exactly where she'd thrown it. However, there was something new. Among the woven darkness and shimmering gold flecks was a faint image of a face. It was Clara's, her expression frozen in silent despair. Meanwhile, Elias's shop remains open to this day. The wooden sign still creaks in the wind. People still comment on his impeccable work. And the whispers, they say the shop's inventory grows richer every year. But now you know the truth. So let me leave you with a single piece of advice. If you ever come across a tailor named Elias offering fabric that seems too beautiful to be real, walk away and don't look back.